Here in the UK right now, we're effectively in our version of a drought. It has been an incredibly dry summer with so little rain. It kind of started this way off in the winter and then continued through the spring, right now into summer where, that some of the plants are definitely suffering due to the lack of water, and you just have to keep on top of watering all the time. So with droughts becoming more and more common, how do we plant around this to get some more drought tolerant planting? Well, in today's video, I'm going to be focusing specifically on that. I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite drought tolerant plants. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list. There will be some that I'm not including here, but I just wanted to share some of my personal favorites that I use in the garden that I've had a lot of success with, and I can really attest to being drought tolerant. So here are some of my absolute favorites. By the way, I'm trying to hit 3,000 subscribers, so if you haven't already, consider subscribing and supporting my channel. I would really appreciate it, and hopefully we can reach my goal. Let's start off with Perovskia Blue Spire. This is also known as the Russian sage. This beautiful, I believe it used to be called a salvia type plant. I don't know if it officially is anymore, but it's kind of, in the same vein as most salvias where it is really drought tolerant. It gets decently tall, it loves the sunny aspect. Most of these drought tolerant plants do, I tend to find, really love the sun. And yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. Super drought tolerant. You really don't need to water this much at all. In fact, it's recommended that you don't. It really doesn't want to sit in wet soils, so you can just let this thing dry out. Now, if you've got a younger plant that you have just planted recently, like this year, or maybe even on its second year, you're going to have to water this more. I think that's a piece of advice I want to give to everyone. Don't let anyone tell you that just because a plant is drought tolerant, you don't have to water it. That's not true. You will still have to water these plants, just not as much. And in their first and second years, they're not going to be as strong. They need time to build a good root system. So in that time, you will have to water them more. So that's a really important piece of advice that I wanted to share, because there is still a lot of misinformation about how often you should water drought tolerant plants. And the answer is, for the first 2 years, still a decent amount so they can get that strong root system. And that applies to all of the plants on this list, in my opinion. Next, we have the beautiful lavender. This is specifically English lavender, but I know some people like the other kinds. This will apply to all of the lavenders. They do not want to be watered that much at all during summer once they're established. Absolutely beloved by pollinators, great for making hedgerows and ground cover and such. Yeah, these plants, you really don't need to water them that often at all. Like a nice, decently established one like this, I barely ever water it, and it's fine. It never shows any signs of not wanting to be watered. A lot of people have them in pots, and I will say, if you have plants in pots, disregard all of this advice. This is for plants in the ground. If you've got plants in pots, they need to be watered significantly more. The same even applies to lavender. That's not to say you should overwater it. We probably don't need to water it every day, but you will need to water it more often than you would if they're in the ground. When they're in the ground, they'll have a much stronger, deeper root system, and they can gain moisture from, super far down and stuff like that. But yeah, when it comes to being in a pot, they will dry out, I'm afraid. So keep on top of watering them if they're in a pot. Nepeta kind of reminds me of lavender, and it's another one that's really drought tolerant. Nepeta is actually a plant that doesn't mind being a little bit wet. That's why if someone has a more sort of wet garden, they might use this instead of lavender, which I totally get. It looks really similar. It's definitely a good replacement. But yeah, again, it can handle a drought. It's completely fine handling a drought, in fact. It really won't complain at all. So yeah, if you're looking for another one that's kind of an alternative to lavender, get a Nepeta. I love how crazy they go. This one is Walker's Low. They're fantastic. Definitely recommended. The same applies to other types of salvias than this Perovskia. We also have Salvia caradonna. If I move over here, let me find you an example of a better looking one. Okay, this one looks a bit better at the moment. They're a bit short at the moment because I did have to cut them back so they would continue flowering. But yeah, this plant is very drought tolerant. It doesn't need to be watered that much at all. It'll do fine, honestly. It'll do fine. It's happy to dry out, and it'll be cool. I've even had one in a pot that was fine with drying out. So I think these guys are really hardy. The same applies to most salvias. You really don't want to overwater them. Like salvia hot lips, cherry lips, all of the lip series, they don't mind being dry. You know, any of the claries, Balkan claries they're called, they don't mind being dry. So definitely something to keep in mind. We also have the Eryngium sea holly with these beautiful blue flowers. Now, despite being called a sea holly, it doesn't mind drying out. It doesn't mind dry conditions. I mean, the insects love it. Look at this sleepy little bee. He's loving life right now. He's getting so much pollen from this. It's actually spiky as well, which I find quite funny. It actually is spiky. It doesn't just look spiky, it is. I know some plants can be a bit deceiving, but this one is as spiky as it looks. And yeah, it's totally fine drying out. It really doesn't mind it. It likes drought conditions. It's cool with it. So yeah, if you're looking for another drought tolerant one, and especially one in a really cool color that's blue, then yeah, you definitely want yourself an Eryngium sea holly. There's lots of different varieties. I checked the hardiness because I found that actually some of these aren't that hardy, which is a bit strange. I thought they'd be one of the hardier plants, but no, not all of them. So definitely check the hardiness for your climate. Again, it loves the sunny aspect. I'm not mentioning that for every one because all of them on this list do, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that this one does love the sun. Verbascams are another one. Now, Verbascams are plants that I've actually seen kind of growing in the wild almost, and you can kind of tell by those sort of leaves. They remind me of dock leaves, if you know what they are. I feel like a lot of plants that have leaves like this, like foxgloves and such and hollyhocks, tend to, I wouldn't really say grow in the wild, but you'll see them growing like in the pavement and such, and that's a good sign that a plant is drought tolerant because they wouldn't grow there otherwise. This is a really tall one. I really wish I knew the exact name of this variety. I don't, I'm so sorry, but I do know that pretty much all of the Verbascams are very drought tolerant. So definitely a great one if you're looking for a nice sort of tall, more wild looking drought tolerant plant. This is a fantastic addition to any garden in my opinion. How about a drought tolerant climber? Here we have a lovely Wisteria. Now this one's still growing up the arch, although it's doing incredibly well. It's quite a young plant. You can get them in purple, you can get them in white, sort of pinkish colors, and yeah, they're very, very drought tolerant. In fact, they definitely don't want to be overwatered or they will die and lose all their leaves. I have made that mistake before and I basically lost all the leaves, but they're also pretty hardy, so they will bounce back. So don't worry about making mistakes. Everyone makes gardening mistakes. Yeah, definitely a great one to have in the garden if you're looking for something nice and drought tolerant. Now my back border is absolutely filled with drought tolerant plants, so let's go over some of them. First of all, we have the beautiful Echinops, the globe thistle, blue vitro, I believe this one is called. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, these are great. These are really fantastic. They get so nice and drought tolerant. I love the blue color. A lot of the thistle type plants are really drought tolerant, to be honest, and this is a great example of one that will handle its drought really well. We also have echinaceas, which also don't mind drought conditions. These beautiful sort of pink flowers that they get. You can get other varieties, although they're not nearly as hardy as Echinacea magnus, which is the main variety. Yeah, it really, really doesn't mind things drying out too much. It's definitely a great drought tolerant plant for your garden. I also find that yarrows are pretty good. Achillea, this one is gold plate, I believe, or cloth of gold. I really need to remember the exact variety. But yeah, again, doesn't mind drying out, doesn't mind dry conditions. It's sort of a plant you'll see growing in the wild actually, so that's a good sign that it can handle drought conditions because it's not really being, you know, babied in a garden as such. It's just being allowed to dry out in the wild. So yeah, it really doesn't mind the drier conditions of things, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, those are some of my absolute favorite drought tolerant plants. I hope you enjoyed checking this list out. Like I said, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are definitely others that I haven't included here. So share some of your favorites down in the comment section below. What are some drought tolerant plants that you have in your garden that you really love and you would recommend to others? Don't forget to subscribe if you like gardening content, and I'll catch you for more videos.